Number one, he was sustainable because he had a radical commitment to simple basics of the faith in Corinth. That's number one, subpoint one. Now, I'm not insinuating that he did not do that in Athens, but I do think there was a signaled change in his approach from Athens to Corinth. Here's where I get that from. In 1 Corinthians 2, 1 through 5, Paul describes his Corinthian approach. Okay, you tell me what you hear. He says, "When I came to you, brothers, I did not come preaching to you the testimony of God with lofty speech or wisdom." Now, where had he been where there was a lot of lofty speech and wisdom? Okay, we're just talking, right? So now, he says, I decided to know nothing amongst you except Jesus Christ and him crucified. And I was with you in weakness and in fear and much trembling. And my speech and my message were not in plausible words of wisdom, but in demonstration of the Spirit and power, so that your faith might not rest in the wisdom of men, but in the power of God. Again, I'm not saying he didn't do that in Athens, but it sounds like there was an approach change when he got to Corinth, that he was going to radically focus on the simple basics. Christ crucified, resurrected, that's all you need to worry about. To me, it sounds like that. And I think that is a strong recipe for lasting success in ministry. The simpler your ministry is, the more long-term sustainable it is. That's a good rule of thumb. So secondly, we see Paul had friends and support in Corinth. He had friends and support. Again, he was with a partial team in other cities before and alone in Athens. Here in Corinth, we see an immediate friendship with Aquila, Priscilla. We see in verse 5, Silas and Timothy arrive. So he's got all his people there. And later, we see some more names come up of friends who were made along the way. Converted Jews from the synagogue, which would be Titus, Justus, and Crispus, who would open their homes to him. So let me give you just a brief practical life point. Having people in your life is vital to long-term health and sustainability. The enemy wants you isolated, alone, depressed, overwhelmed. That's what the enemy wants out of your life. You need people to be there to support you. And I don't mean online people. This church is not just supposed to be a recurring lecture hall experience in your life. It is supposed to be the people of God you've covenanted together with in membership, and you know each other, and you've been in each other's homes, and you've attended weddings and funerals for each other, and you've attended baby showers, and you've signed up for the meal train, and you've shared and received prayer requests back and forth, public and private. And I could go on, but this is supposed to be, fundamentally, this is a family that we enjoy and that new people can come into. That's what this is. We're a family, and we should be a family. But the beautiful thing, I can't join your family at your house. If I really like the way, your family reunions go, and I want to get invited so bad, I just can't. I mean, you can invite me, but I'd be the guy on the side, just hanging out. Why is that guy at the family reunion? How did he get the T-shirt? Don't worry about that. He's the preacher. He can come. It wouldn't make me part of your family, right? But we are a family as a church, but we should want this family to grow, for people to come into it and enjoy all the wonderful things that we enjoy about this family. It's not exclusive to us. We should have so much love amongst ourselves that when we see hurting people in the world, we think, man, they need a little bit of Kirby Woods love. That's what they need. They need to come in here, hear the gospel, be ministered to, find community, plug into a group, get into a class, plug in. That's what we should want for other people outside to become our family. You need that in your life. Every single one of you need that in your life. Paul had it in Corinth, and it was more than he had in the previous city, and I think it contributed to his 1.5-year stay. Thirdly, He was more sustainable in Corinth because he was financially supported. Insert gulp. I'm about to show you something that you may not know because I didn't know it until I studied it this week. We already established Paul was willing to be a tent maker. He was willing to be a tent maker for his money. It took a lot of money to travel the world. It still does, right? It took a lot of money to go on boat rides and take horses from Thessalonica to Berea, and camels maybe, and meals and lodging and clothing. That stuff's not free. They didn't just travel the world for free. Cross-empire expeditions for a team of preachers cost money, just like it would today. Well, Paul wasn't going to make finances the reason he could not fulfill God's call on his life, so he did the tent making to support himself when he wasn't receiving money for preaching the gospel. And a lot of people mistakenly think that this means that all ministers and all leaders of Christian nonprofits should all work for free. What I want you to see is that it may not be an accident that Paul stayed longer in Corinth after Silas and Timothy came from Macedonia. Let me show you something. In Acts, this chapter 18, verse 5, it simply just says, when Silas and Timothy arrived from Macedonia. That's all it says, right? You don't get any more details about what they brought with them. That's all you have. But if we go to 2 Corinthians 11:9, we hear from a different perspective the same exact moment. I'll read it for you now. It says this. Paul says, when I was with you, talking to the Corinthian church, when I was with you and was in need, I did not burden anyone, meaning I did not ask you to pay me. For the brothers who came from Macedonia supplied my need. So I refrained and will refrain from burdening you in any way. Paul tells the Corinthians in a later letter, hey, remember that time I came to you and I labored and preached and taught and made disciples and did your wedding and funeral, and I had all this incredible time to spend with you and I wasn't tent making? Remember how you guys weren't paying me at that time? How did that happen? The money came from Macedonia. That's how that happened. So we learned that Silas and Timothy brought with them a wad of cash from Macedonia. Now, what's in Macedonia? Philippi's in Macedonia. Who's there? Miss Purple Dye herself, Lydia. I can't prove it, but I think it. The Corinthians got to enjoy the gospel because Lydia paid for it. Look back at verse 5 in Acts 18. When Silas and Timothy arrived in Macedonia, Paul was, what's the word you have there? I like that, pressed. I got occupied in mine. That's good too, yeah. He was occupied with the word, testifying to the Jews that the Christ was Jesus. It seems like this financial stability brought the gift of Paul to be occupied with the word. So think about this. Paul was going to do ministry either way. He was going to do ministry either way. Either he'd spend time making tents, earning money so that he wasn't dependent on anybody, or he would take the gifts as they came and would go, quote, full-time when it was available, but he wasn't going to let finances drive the yes or no of ministry. Let me just say something. Maybe you've never heard a preacher say this. I'm going to say it on the stage on a Sunday morning. I am thankful to the Lord that you support me financially and I get to preach God's word full-time. Thank you. If I weren't paid, I would still preach. I don't know where or how or what the context would be. I would still study and try to grow in my knowledge of God's word and my ability. But I think I might not have the same quality. The depth might not be the same because, as you know, time is so valuable to put in study. If you're rushed, again, teachers, you know what it's like to teach on a short week or on a week when something crazy happened in your life and it's Saturday night and you're like, I gotta do class tomorrow. You know, that happens. So I'll make a promise to you. If you continue to give and allow me the privilege of preaching full time, I will continue to give my absolute best to study God's word so that you have no doubt it is worth it. There ought to never be a preacher made full-time, and preaches like he just rolled out of bed in his rambling stories. Ought never to happen. It's a shame when it happens. This is a privilege. What I do is a privilege to be able to be occupied with God's word. And it needs to be treated like that. I hope that you get that from our time together. So that's what I think helped make Paul sustainable, is that he was supported by a commitment to basics, by friends, and by stable finances. Paul lasted 1.5 years in Corinth because he was supported in sustainability.